Hey, what's up, YouTube? Welcome back to another one of Tyler's Tech Tutorials. So, for this video series segment, we're going to focus on building our host machine for our virtual environment. So, I'm going to install Hyper-V on our host machine, and then we're going to build our servers. So it's going to be very similar to what we did last time. Only this time I want to go more into detail about the nuts and bolts on the physical host machine. So if you remember, last time we took a desktop computer and we upgraded the hardware. So we replaced the hard disk mechanical drive with a solid state drive. We replaced the RAM, so we have additional memory, and the processor. Right now it's not bad. So so this is our new machine. It's not a brand new machine. It's a used machine. It's very similar to the other computer that I use. So I took a desktop computer I had in storage, and I upgraded the hardware, just like last time. And only now we have additional memory. I bought some additional sticks of RAM. So now we have 8 gigs of RAM per slot. So we have a total of 16 gigs. So we have additional memory we can allocate to each virtual machine. The solid state, the hard drive, it's a 450 gig hard drive. So there's 2 attached to the motherboard. So this computer has a hard drive for the operating system, and the second hard drive will be for storing the virtual hard disks and additional data storage if needed. It is a Dell Optiplex 3010. The processor is an i3, clocking in at 3.30 gigahertz. So it's not, the greatest. But it's perfect for this lab and demonstration. My personal preference is i5 or better. Like this laptop is running an i7, and it's not bad. For the next demonstration, I actually have it's a quad core, so that's going to be pretty fun. Before building anything, whether it's a program, especially if you're like a network engineer, you want to make sure you sit down with a pen and paper and just good old-fashioned pen and paper, and you want to draft out, you want to build your environment. You want to build the architecture, just like if you're an architect, you want to, draft it up first. Well, here it is. It sucks, you can't really see anything. So we have virtual environment. So we have our host machine, which is called VHM. That stands for virtual host machine. I probably should have gotten rid of the V and just named it host machine. But yeah, it's a virtual host machine because it's going to store virtual machines for our network. So those virtual machines are all going to be servers that will provide resources to other computers and clients on our network. So it's going to configure the essential services on our network. And they're virtual machines, so it's not like I have to buy another server and go through and dedicate additional resources. Resources for computing are finite, and they're expensive, very, very, very expensive. So we have, virtualization is it's a way of taking advantage of our resources and not having to, go through and physically allocate all of them to one specific server, and they're easier to manage, and I'll show you that. So like last time, we we built a virtual machine. I think we added that as an additional domain controller for redundancy. I think we're going to do very similar, only this time we're going to build the core of our network. So we have this is going to be our farm, basically. So right now we don't have no animals are in the farm. So we're going to be adding virtual machines to this. So I have listed VHM running Hyper-V. That is the hypervisor, and the hypervisor is the it's kind of like a, so it's taking all of the components on that computer, on that server, on that laptop. It's going to, all the hardware inside, it's going to virtualize each component. So that's hard drive, RAM, storage, network adapters, wireless, Ethernet. It's going to virtualize that hardware into software, and then you can dedicate that virtualized hardware to your virtual machines. With storage and memory, it's pretty simple, depending on if you're using Hyper-V or VMware. But with the processors, it gets a little bit more complicated, and you have to do a little bit of arithmetic. Not too much. So like, let's say you have a processor that has 4 socket servers. Now with 4 socket servers, we'll have 8 cores that will allow you to dedicate 30 or allocate 32 logical processors to each virtual machine, up to 32 logical processors. So usually it's a good recommended practice to add at least 2 to 4 processors per server. So if it's a domain controller, at least 2. If it's a server for remote desktop services, you want to add probably 2 to 4 at least. So it's not that complicated, honestly, and I'll show you. So this is what Hyper-V looks like, and you'll probably see how this is, looks kind of like the last video. I've already went through and installed this, and this is not the first time I installed it, so it was a little bit easier. Usually it will ask you to reboot. Now let's say I wanted to just install it through the GUI, through the server manager. You just go to next, 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 and then I would find Hyper-V, next, yep. And then it'll probably ask you to reboot to finish the installation. You'll see a little check mark up here. So I've already assigned this a static IP address, and just so you're aware, this is not located where I'm currently at. No, it's not. There are some pretty amazing resources out there in the world right now called cloud computing. And I did touch on that a little bit, but that was mainly for Office 365. Yes, Office 365 is software as a service. So you're providing software to your organization, and essentially it's a service because it has email, SharePoint, like your Word documents, your OneDrive for storage. So yeah, you're providing services through the cloud. That's why it's called SaaS, software as a service. To get more into the nitty-gritty, essentially this is going to build up to the infrastructure as a service, because we are building our virtual infrastructure that will allow us to eventually deploy Office 365. So we'll also have software as a service, but before we can do that, we need to build our infrastructure. This is the foundation of said infrastructure. So I installed Windows Server 2016 Standard Edition, and it's a trial version. I'd have to activate this 180 days from now, 160 by now, I think, because this is relatively recent. I need a product key, so I'd have to go to Microsoft. I'd have to purchase a product key to activate this license, and then that will allow me to install additional roles and features as needed, and it will be licensed with Microsoft's Volume Licensing Center. And that's how Microsoft has become the juggernaut that they have, is by not making you pay for specific software, they make you pay for what's called a product key, whether it's Word or Excel or Office 16. You have to go in and buy a product key, even for Windows 10 and Windows 8 and Windows operating systems servers, Exchange servers, identity management. You have to buy their product key, and then you activate it with that product key to license your software. In this case, it's our operating system. So we have Hyper-V installed. All right. What we want to go through and do now is we want to create this this virtual hard disk. Or no, I'm sorry. We want to create this second hard disk. We're not going to do RAID for this exercise. I'm going to wait till we have the quad core because that has additional storage so I can add. It has additional hard drive bays. So we want to set up this other virtual hard disk. Oh my God, it's not a virtual hard disk. It's a disk. It's a physical disk where I'm going to be storing virtual hard disks. Sorry. So I'm going to get disk. It's going to be disk number 1. I should say it's offline. Yep. Sometimes it's a good idea to format the disk. Alright, so that's going to so it's online now. I don't know why it spat out an error there. So we want to create a partition first. So let's get partition, see what we have. Okay, so we want to go new partition. Assign a drive letter and use maximum disk space. There we go. Whoop, there it is. Now we want to create a volume. So we want to format volume. Drive letter. It's going to be D. File system is going to be NTFS protocols. And we want to confirm. Yeah, let's do true. And now, if we go to our File Explorer, you'll see it. Very cool. All right, so second thing we want to do is we want to right now we don't have any virtual, so we want to create a virtual switch. What is a virtual switch? So let's look up, let's go to our control panel, and let's look at network and internet, network and sharing center, and let's look at adapter settings. Right now we only have one adapter. So we want to virtualize this current network adapter. It's a physical network adapter installed on the computer. So it's hardware. So I want to go to Virtual Switch Manager, and I want to create a external virtual switch. We'll call it V Ethernet. And we're going to enable single root IO input output virtualization, and we're going to allow management of operating systems through this network adapter. So we're going to click apply. We're going to lose connection for a second, hopefully not too long. Sometimes it's relatively quick when it does this. Okay, so now we're gonna try to reconnect to it again. And there it is. Now if we look at our network adapters, we'll see. Now if you'll notice what happens here is, you notice how that a lot of these are in check now. So that's because this is virtualized for this. So we can now build our first virtual machine. So I want to go to VHM, new virtual machine. We're going to call it DC1, and yes, we want to store it in a different location because we don't want to store this on our root drive. We want to. So let's go. Let's create a new folder called Hyper-V, and this is where we're going to save it. Yes, we want to select generation 2. We'll do. We're gonna. We're gonna allocate. Let's say 2.4 for now. Oops. And we're going to create a virtual hard disk. Automatically it's going to do that in the same spot that we created where we're storing it. And then installing the operating system. This is going to be a little bit more trickier because I have to go to, there it is. And that's cool. So this is it's called network attached storage. I think I did touch on this last time. So we want to mount the image for this operating system. So think of it as a DVD drive. I'm going to mount that and like put in a CD, and so it's going to be a virtualized DVD drive. So there it is. So let's look at the properties real quick. Let's see if we can bump this up to virtual processors. Hard disk, very good. We're not going to add a virtual hard disk for now. We're going to leave it as is. Let me see. I think we're good. Automatic startup. We're going to set that to 10 seconds. We don't want it installing if like this server would have, crash and reboot afterwards. We don't want to install all of our servers all at the same time. So we're going to have a 10-second delay. And I think that's about it. So let's get VM. And that's going to show us our virtual machines. I'm going to pipe it to see additional properties. And that's going to give us a report on the virtual machine we just created. I could also hit VM, get VM, start VM, and VM name is DC1. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click. I see it's currently turned off, so I'm going to hit start. And I'm going to hit the spent there because it's good. Normally it asks to hit any key to continue. Let me see if I can go to full screen mode. Very cool. So the installation usually takes the longest. All right. This is usually the hardest part. Now, I've built a total of three in the last 2 years, three Pixie servers, and that is a server that allows you to boot the image over the network. So you don't need to attach anything other than a network adapter. So as long as it has an Ethernet port, you can make sure that is connected to make sure that computer is connected via Ethernet, and then you can install that operating system over the network. And it's quite amazing, especially with the Windows 10 deployment. I've upgraded at least I want to say a couple hundred Windows computers to Windows 10 for actually up to four different companies within the last year or so. And Windows Deployment Services was the feature that I used, and it's pretty awesome because it's literally like that. You can build a number of machines quickly, and you can set a customized image template, so you can build that image, and then all you have to do is name the computer, update DNS and group policy on the client side, and set it up for the user and deploy it. You always want to make sure the end user is very happy with their product in the end. So like go through and set everything up for them. Like make sure it's actually running for them before you take it to them. And sometimes it's best to have them actually log in and look at it and be like, okay, let's see how this is. I like this. Very cool. Awesome. You want to keep the customer happy. You want to keep them coming back. And that's how they will be content with your product. I mean, I'm not trying to sell anything, obviously, because it's tech support, but in the end, you want to keep the customer happy. With Windows 10, a lot of people have had trouble all over the place because it's a different interface, different features. Windows 7 it does have similar features, but a lot of the software that Windows 7 was bundled with does not come with Windows 10. So you'll have to train your users if you haven't migrated to Windows 10 yet. You have to train your users on how to use it. Make sure you spend time with them and be patient with them. That's a rule of thumb. Try not to get frustrated. I mean, for the most part, people do a really good job. Once they see the Windows 10 gets a lot of negative publicity, but it's actually, I think in the end, users do enjoy it because it does have additional features that Windows 7 does not. And then you throw in the Word software or the Office 16, 2013 or 16 software, even cooler, even better. So I could build another virtual machine. I'm probably not going to right now because, as you can see, now let's build it. So we're going to build our let's see. Let's build another virtual. So we're going to go DM1. This is going to be it's going to stand for domain number 1, and this is actually going to be a number of features. So it'll include so what I had was domain controller for DC1, file server FS1, and then ADFS proxy, that's going to be DM1. But what I'm going to do is, since we are limited with some of the resources we have on our network, on this network, we're going to do the domain number 1 is going to be our Windows server, and that is going to be also be our DC2, but it's also going to be our ADFS for Active Directory Federation Services. And that's a whole other video on its own, because that includes security and identity management, and it will set policies for accessing your software within your organization and outside your network. That's also going to have information services installed, so it's going to be a web server, possibly certificates, maybe. We might do certificates on another server, and it could also be file services. So really bad idea to have all those features running on one server. You want to split it up. You want to have, try to separate each services for, each server should have a limited number of services running. So if in the event one goes down, you still have something available that'll take its place. That's called failover clustering. And and there's also Hyper-V replica, which I don't know if I'm going to touch base on that, but we have the foundation built, and it's moving along pretty quickly. You see, this is an entire operating system that usually takes a couple hours, but since we have optimized the hardware on this machine, it's moving pretty quickly. So we installed Hyper-V. We virtualized the physical host machine, and we're now building virtual servers on this machine. This is going to be our farm. So we're going to feed our clients, feed our end users from the farm. We're going to spread their knowledge with information services and IT support. So what I'm using is for the disk image, I attached an image, and that's currently stored on network attached storage, accessible on the network. A network. Usually you'll find them in enterprise level environments. So I briefly touched base on cloud computing. All right. And I did want to show you what it looks like real quick. So here we have, this is AWS, Amazon Web Services. All right, so right now I have a number of instances running. And I want to connect to one of my instances, so I'm going to go here, connect. Let's use the browser. Oops. Connect. There we are. So let's what is it again? I'm trying to get rid of anyways. So let's say I wanted to install a web server on here. Alright, so let's do that real quick. I'm going to install an Apache web server, and then I would go to that IP address upon configuring the server, and I could build my web server. So let's say I wanted to use this as a template for my business, and I wanted to install build a LAMP server. So sudo, let me see. There it is. So let's allow it in our firewall. Then let's install SQL Server. So that's AWS, just to kind of give you a brief example. All right. This is cloud computing through Azure. So there's AWS, and Azure. They're the two primary players in the game right now, dominant players. Red Hat. So IBM just purchased Red Hat, and they're currently trying to build a competitive product that will match Azure and AWS. So right now, so you go in here and you can build virtual networks. So resource groups, virtual storage accounts, and you can manage this all through our favorite friend and tool, PowerShell. The Azure So the cool thing about this is, you can manage it all through PowerShell. Let's say I wanted to connect to my virtual network or my Azure tenant. First of all, you have to install the Azure module through PowerShell. So you notice how that asked me for a password, but AWS didn't. Why not? When I logged into that virtual machine from the web browser, this one didn't ask me for a product key. How come? Because I am using what's called RSA. And RSA involves a public and private key. So there's a public key that shares to everyone. Then there is a private key that only me, the user, has. So when I go to log in, I am hashing the private key with the public key, and if it matches, it will authenticate me as the user. Say, okay, you're allowed. So it's not even asking for a password. It's matching the key. It's matching the keys. So that's the advantage of using public-private keys like that. RSA is the Rivest Shamir admin. Is one of the public key crypto systems widely used for secure data transmission. The acronym RSA is the initial letters of the surnames are. Yeah, okay. So let me just pull it over here for so you can read it. Yeah, so you got to generate the key and then you distribute the key. So here's the algorithm. It's pretty cool, especially if you have Linux servers in your environment. And it's nice that I actually generated this this key pair using Windows. So I generated the key, then I saved the private key, and then I loaded the key into the management system. So whenever I would go to log in to the server, it's going to log, as long as I have that private key stored on this device, it's going to log me in. So that's the advantages of it. The only problem is if you lose that, like you should set it with a passphrase, obviously, but it really kind of gets rid of the password use of passwords, which is nice in the sense that, for one, we have too many passwords, way too many passwords. So And so what it's going to do is it's going to take 2000 2048 bits, and it's going to hash that. So if I'm a hacker and I'm trying to gain access, I want that private key. That's what I need to gain access to it. But it's almost impossible, even with advanced deciphering tools. It's going to require time and patience, but it's not unbreakable. It really isn't. Especially if you're setting some of this up for demonstration purposes. So, okay, here we go. So now I can go in. I can give it a password, and it's going to ask me to sign into it now. Now, you notice how I'm kind of whipping right along. The last time we used the network shell. This time we're going to use the server core interface through PowerShell. So we're going to go to network settings after typing the command, and then we want to okay, so we want to set 0, and then we want to set network address. We want to assign static, and for this environment we're going to use see what I did there. See the default. There you go. I'm going to return to the menu. And you see how it's going to reinitialize the network adapter. So we want to set the time. Now let's say my data center was, I could leave this hypothetically because my data center I selected was actually in Pacific time. But for this, we're going to just set it back to Eastern Standard Time. But am I really in that time zone? So we want to change the computer name, obviously. And the computer name is going to be DC1. Let's restart. It's going to restart. Now you notice how that's moving right along. Yeah, Hyper-V is not a bad system. VMware is obviously preferred. But as you can see, it's pretty cool.